All right, welcome back everybody. How are we all doing? So this is the third episode where I have a guest by my side, and otherwise known as the Benchmel. How are you going, man?
I'm fantastic, couldn't be better. We're just enjoying a nice sunset over there. It's about 8 p.m. local time.
Yeah,
We're
it's
just
crazy.
about 30 kilometers south of Vienna. So
Yeah.
really enjoying it right now.
Yeah, and hopefully the lighting remains half consistent. If it doesn't, well, oh well, you'll be all right. Yeah, so I'm in Austria currently, even though I haven't been updating you guys as frequently as I should have been. In Vienna, it's a pretty beautiful place. Ben just took me out, just toured me around today around the city, and been to Salzburg and a couple other places, and yeah, it's pretty nice. It's not
What
a
do you
bad
think of
place to
Austria? I would want to know. Now you saw sort of like two sides of Austria. You saw the very urban side, Vienna and Salzburg, but you also
Yeah.
saw a lot of countryside.
Yeah.
Which one is actually the one you would reckon?
Hard question.
better?
You know, I was in Switzerland before this. I was in Lucerne, and I reckon that's probably the most pretty place I've ever been on earth. Yeah, I don't reckon I'll be able to beat that in a long time. So I've got to say Switzerland takes it in that regard.
All right.
However, it's different. It's different, man. I really liked the countryside. Actually, I thought it was beautiful. But I also really like the city. I was saying to Ben actually, in the city, there's a really great mix of like medieval kind of art, which is like all these buildings which are obviously quite old and architecturally just beautiful, but then like right next to them there are these really modern, just financial and like business.
That's right.
institution
Vienna
buildings
actually
and
has
stuff.
two different business districts as well. So it's known for its architecture and the old buildings.
Yeah.
But there are some sort of like just flocks of new building, modern art as well
Yeah.
in there. So that makes it very diverse and multicultural.
that's
So
cool. And then also, if you didn't know, Ben is probably one of the biggest supporters of the channel. Yeah, he's he watches all the videos, at least I think, and you comment on heaps, and so yeah, he's been keeping up to date with the insights. So
no, I've really been enjoying them. I think
I appreciate that.
support should be growing.
Yeah.
I'm really putting out there some good words for you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Anyway, so enough of the updates. We have a limited amount of time. So I think what we were going to be talking about today was language, and although that's a very broad topic, and we'll delve right into the details of it. But yeah, I think that's something that we've both been kind of talking about a little bit while we've been here and found interesting, but we haven't really got too stuck into it. And just especially about how language differs between Australia and Austria and just other countries in general. So English and German, obviously. And yeah, well, where do you want to begin, Ben?
I would like to point out that when comparing Australia to Europe, you would actually find a lot more diversity within Europe, because we have 28 very sovereign states with their own languages, whereas
28
Australia,
languages?
No, it's
No,
not
but
28 languages, but it's
yeah,
28
sorry.
countries
Yeah.
speaking different languages. I think it's about 20 different languages and dialects.
It's crazy.
So
yeah.
it's very diverse, and people find it at times very difficult to communicate. Whereas in Australia, you would have this one major
Universal
language.
yeah.
And you just told me that people from South Australia can't really tell whether someone's from Western Australia or Queensland. It sort of like all sounds pretty much the same,
Yeah,
right?
I guess you probably could tell someone's from Queensland. 'Cause
Okay.
their accents are fucked up. But everywhere else is pretty similar. Yeah.
All right.
You wouldn't
So
be able
we
to
have
tell.
this across. I talked to you about this. The next major city from Vienna would be Bratislava, and they speak a completely different language to German. It's about 50 kilometers away, and people there wouldn't speak a word of German. So we have these small distances, but uniquely different languages.
crazy.
And these, in German, we have a very nice word for that. I taught you that as well. It's Fleckerlteppich, meaning it's a rug that's made out of small squares, which are all different.
Yeah.
And they all form one rug. Right?
Yeah.
And that's the same. That's how I see the European project, the European Union. It would be one big rug with each and every sovereign state having their own languages, but they all form this one rug.
Yeah, and
that's-
even in Switzerland when I was there, it's a little bit different. But within Switzerland, this is a tiny little country, probably the size of South Australia, I'd say. They have 4 different languages. 4 fucking different languages: Italian, Swiss, German, and bloody
And then
like their own
French
unique,
as well.
French, and then their own unique one as well. It's crazy. So just like you're going like, I don't know, 50 kilometers and you're bloody in a whole different place.
Yeah. And that makes ruling a country different as well, difficult as well, right?
Yeah,
so
for
you
sure.
would have to agree on one central language of the country.
Yeah.
But in Switzerland, there's a big problem going on. It's not a very sort of like a geographically big place, but it has to be ruled in one language. So everybody has to understand the law. Right? So it has to be translated in 4 different ways.
Really?
So that makes it a bit more complicated. So that's actually an advantage of big countries like the United States or Australia, having like one regulated language that all children learn in school and that all people are obliged to follow. So that's like,
And you know, you'd think that would be somewhat of having 4 different languages in one nation that most people would have like a little bit of a grasp of. As an English person, you'd think that would be somewhat of an advantage going to somewhere like that. You got 4 times the chance to speak one of those languages and somehow have a form of communication other than our own. But anyway, I've been saying to Ben on this topic that it's really quite embarrassing actually coming over. Myself personally, I only speak one language. I'm fucking useless, and then coming over to Europe and just everywhere, just having to get by, just speaking my own mother tongue. I don't know. I feel quite ashamed at the fact that like everyone else is having to adapt their own needs and this basic form of communication just for me. For instance, I'm staying with Ben's family right now, and it's a family that consists of 5. And when we're at the dinner table, there's 6 of us, and you know, guess what? Half the time they're all speaking in English just to adapt for my own personal circumstances, which is nice of them, but like, in a way, that's probably not how it should be. Like, you know, like you would have thought that the one person would change, and that's something you'd be used to with English people, correct?
it would be very, I would be very used to that.
And that's why your English is so bloody good as well.
In Austria, in the school system, you actually have to learn English. You're obliged to do it. Right?
Yeah,
so you have German as your normal mother tongue, but then we learn English as a world language.
Yeah.
So children are not forced, but sort of like they are meant to talk
Forced,
English.
yeah, no, for sure.
Because it's an international language.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't see it as you said it's a bit of a shame that everyone has to adapt to you.
Yeah, and it's pure arrogance and selfishness. Just it's the perfect example of and I'm included in this. I'm fucking admitting it. But I guess it's not technically my fault because there was hardly any pressure whatsoever for me to learn another language. I didn't have to. Not many people do.
Why should you?
Why should I? Because for this exact reason, everyone else is having to adapt for our needs, and that's not necessarily how it should be. And that's the difficult thing. But I think at least one. You know, like if someone goes and asks you, like the amount of occasions where I've been over here and like anyone's gone and asked, like, oh, like, do you speak any other languages? It's gonna be like, nah. Like it's it's disgraceful in my opinion, and I'm so included in that. So. Yeah, I find it quite difficult, but fortunately for us, it's because of this world-renowned knowledge that English people refuse to speak any other language other than their own. Everyone else does adapt, just for the sake of human, I don't know, everyone getting along somewhat. But then imagine if, for instance, you were from Spain, all right? And I was saying this in Switzerland. Imagine if you're from Spain and you only speak Spanish. You took the same stance that us English people took.
You wouldn't get very far.
You'd be bloody screwed.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking about before. Like, don't you reckon that's a bit
and that's
scary?
actually a trait that French people are renowned to have. Like French people would not want to adapt at all.
They would refuse to other languages.
Yeah, they would refuse to speak English at all. Right, so if you arrive in a French hotel and you would say, "When can I check in?" they would be answering in fluent French.
Even if they knew English, do you think?
Even if they knew English, yeah, that's the thing, because they just refuse to adapt to other people. They are so proud of their language, they straight on talk French, right? Even though they might know English, right?
That's classic.
But when it comes to world languages and international approaches to languages, do you think one day we will have one language, universal language that will?
Yeah, no, I've actually been thinking about this a little bit recently, and a good friend of mine actually. This might be a little bit of a long story, but a good friend of mine actually brought up the topic of how, well, in a sense, all countries are losing a lot of their culture because of how accessible they are from all these tourists, okay? So like you go to Rome right now, for instance, that's the most touristy place I've ever been. And if you just came with zero knowledge about where you were, the amount of different people you'd see there, like so many Asians, so many Indians, so many Africans, so many white people, like you really almost wouldn't be able to pick that you were in central Italy if it wasn't for the fact that there's pizza and all these other culturally distinct elements there, but you know, like places are losing their sense of identity sheerly because the people, it's so diverse. And so, you know, you look in 50 years time possibly where travel isn't really that bigger of a deal because you can probably get from Australia to Europe within 3 hours on a massive plane. Like it's foreseeable. I think
But
about
don't you-
that's probably the instance where, you know, then again languages will start merging. I'm not sure which language it'll be. Maybe it'll be English, maybe it'll be Chinese because they're so, you know.
Don't you think this globalization actually proves to be something that's good for the world? I mean,
Yes
I can
and
follow
no.
your point
Yes
that
and no.
culture is being, or identity is being lost. I can see that with a very multicultural approach to, let's say, Vienna as well, because we have a lot of tourists too.
Yeah.
So you couldn't really pick out that if it were not for the sites, as you said, that you were in Vienna, because there's just so many people and so many different people.
Yeah.
But isn't that a good thing? And
Yeah.
wouldn't it be great if you could talk to all these people in one centralized global language?
But then, like, you know, so many people have such a passion for learning other languages, and I think it's so cool. I really, you know, I do somewhat understand that argument. I do. But I also think that different languages is such a beautiful concept in itself. Like people who, you know, these polyglots who can speak like 15 or 20 different languages, like that's an amazing skill. And you know, like they're the most, I don't know, like communicative people out there. Like, you know, I think it's quite cool. So I don't know on that one, man. I don't know.
I talked to you before about this. Language is a very distinct part of a culture. So you would be right that if this multicultural and global approach to sort of like one language, it diminishes certain dialects or certain languages, that actually would be true. Because in German we have different dialects, and you
Yeah.
can tell whether someone's
Amazing.
from Germany, Switzerland or Austria just by listening to them
Yeah.
for about half a minute. I can tell whether someone's from around my local area or whether he's from 200 kilometers away. It's just in the language, in the
Yeah.
dialect, in what words he uses, what word order he prefers. So that's all in the language, and it, as you said, it would all be lost.
Yeah, exactly.
it
All
were
these
for the-
subtleties and all these nuances, and I think that's something to be valued. And I definitely think, from a personal stance at least, because I think I will live overseas. I've said that to you. I suspect I will, because I want to get a little bit, I don't know, broaden my horizons and see what the world has to offer. And then if I was to move to another country, preferably which actually didn't speak English, obviously it would be a smart decision to actually learn that language.
So would you rather speak English and another language, both like your mother tongue, or would you rather have like 3 or 4 languages with English being your main language and having 3 or 4 sort of like
you kind of
wishy-washy?
Yeah, no, 100% too. And
Too.
yeah, because you know, like at least yeah, I think being able to speak fluently is the goal. You know, if you, for instance, wouldn't be able to recognise that I was bloody Australian, like that's amazing. You know, for instance, and I think we're very far off that. But today we were going shopping a little bit, and every time I'd say "dunker" to people, which if you don't know means thank you. And I'm sure I said that wrong, but every time I say it, Ben just laughs, and then like the bloody person I say "dunker" to laughs, and it's like, what the fuck did I say wrong? I said the word, and he's like, nah, you said it a little bit off. Or like, you know, it's
That's
like,
true.
I don't get it, man.
It's
I
all
don't
in the
get it.
pronunciation, but this diversity, this global diversity that exists in the world,
Yeah,
it's being people are being brought closer together.
yeah,
And I think from a distanced view of this whole mess of people coming from different countries,
Yeah.
different places of the world, that's something to be proud of as humanity.
Yeah,
You have to
I guess,
be proud
I guess.
of getting people together from all edges of the world. That was never
Yeah.
possible before.
yeah.
70, 80 years ago, that would have
Yeah.
been just outrageous. People
It's right,
coming
it's
from
right.
India and the United
And
States
the
and
ironic-
Northern Europe all meeting in
For
Africa.
sure.
That would be just a catastrophe. It would never have happened.
And the
People
ironic
would have
thing is,
clashed as well.
they at that stage 70 years ago, they would have been like, the dream is exactly where we are right now. They would have been like, the dream is that everyone can kind of like, you know, somewhat get along and manage to communicate. And now that we're actually there, the grass is always greener. We're like, don't you reckon? I kind of wish that it was like 70 years ago, where
Of course,
everywhere
yeah.
had its distinct culture and stuff. And
People always want to go back. They don't want to look ahead.
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's a big problem when it comes to human progress. We've
Yeah.
come very far when it comes to medicine being available and poverty being
yeah, they're
diminished.
whole different. Yeah,
And
yeah,
there
yeah.
are huge topics that humanity has achieved so much,
Yeah.
and we just don't see it.
This is on the book you're
Because
reading. Yeah,
that's on the book I'm reading. It's from Johann Norberg. It's 10 Reasons to Look Forward to the Future. It's a very good book.
Yeah.
But it outlines people who want to go back to the golden age, right? Back to the 60s and 70s when everything,
the good old days.
the good old days when,
Yeah.
when everything was brilliant. But there's a good teacher, and that's sort of like a merchandise from his book, which says the good old days are tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right?
It's quite nice.
And that gives you a view into the future, and I think we shouldn't really worry too much about whether there will be one language or whether there will be 200
it's not
languages.
worth worrying about.
It's
I
just,
agree.
it's going to happen, and it's going to be good the way it will be.
Yeah, for sure. You know, one other thing that I've been, do you reckon, I feel as though, for instance, if I was to try and learn another language, I think it would be, or at least learn it fluently, it'd be an absolute necessity for me to live there firstly, or like, you know, live there would be the dream, but like at least be talking with people who speak that language on a daily basis. Do you reckon, for instance, when you like catch up with English people or English speaking people, is that when you learn is that when you learn the most English? Because your English is exceptional. Probably the best I've actually, like, this is a massive compliment, but the best I've heard of a non-English speaking person. And so when do you reckon you've had the biggest jumps in learning in terms of that?
My biggest jumps in learning have for sure been when I've spent more than 1 week with English speaking people. My uncle is from the UK, and I spend every summer with him.
Yeah.
And I really noticed the learning curve going up over the time period when I was there. Just because day-to-day communications, making breakfast together, that requires language, that requires English. So you have to get that in your blood. You have to get the juice flowing.
I
right?
talk exactly like I would talk to an Australian person, like no difference whatsoever. And I somewhat do it just to challenge you a little bit. I'm saying all these phrases and this slang and stuff, but dead set, I don't change the absolute word. I don't, like, wow, that's crazy. And sorry.
And I think you have to be open to accept that you're not at the same skill level. So I would know that there are some certain phrases that you will know that I won't know. I can't
which
know,
is expected.
right?
Yeah.
And you have to be open to learn those phrases.
The day you know more phrases than I do is the day I'll probably fucking do something very bad. Like, that's a horrible.
Well, the thing is, you have to be open to learn. That's the big difference. A lot of people go to language camps because their parents force them to go.
Yeah.
But then they actually speak their mother tongue in the language camp with their friends, which makes no sense. If you don't want to go to a place and really want to actively learn the language, that will get you nowhere. And I think, why did I say more than 1 week? Because I think it takes sort of like a week to adjust.
How long have you been learning English for?
For 8 years now.
8 fucking years, yes. It's a
So
while.
you study English starting in primary school in Austria, usually in the 4th year.
Yeah.
So I started when I was about 10, and I'm 19 now. So bits and pieces being
And
added
so
every year.
you came to Australia when you were how old?
10 years.
10
We
years,
actually
and
met
so that
10
was-
years ago.
that's
That
a-
was
that's a
actually
pretty good-
before I was studying English in school.
Yeah. Wow. So yeah, to give some context as to how I met the Schmells, and Ben specifically. Schmells?
Chalmers, that's right.
Schmells. Both will do. Yeah, so they came over to Adelaide, good old Adelaide in 2010, and then we came 2010,
2012.
2012, and
For
then
the
we came
Olympics.
back, and then we came back in 2012 to Austria, and then you came to Australia how
Last year.
recently?
Last year.
So my
2017.
family hasn't seen your family for like 9 years,
Yeah.
8 years. Wow, it's a long time. But I feel like we've still kept in touch. Well, all of us are still kept in touch quite well, just due to the power of social media and so forth, and communication nowadays, and
Which
language.
would never have been
specifically.
possible 70 years
And
ago.
this brings us off into a great new topic, or a similar topic. But speaking of social media, and you know, this whole difference in language stretches far beyond just face-to-face communication. Even over text, it is so different in Europe specifically, and in Austria as well. So, okay, you know, us Australians typically talk over Messenger, the Facebook Messenger app, and we're quite standard about it. You use your thumbs and you send texts and stuff. But however, no, they're very different over here. And instead, I'm speaking on your behalf a little bit, but they often they use WhatsApp, and voice messages are like just as common as text messaging, I
It's
guess.
probably even more common than text messages.
More common.
Right, so me and my friends, we would communicate over voice messages. Right?
Yeah.
So you have WhatsApp, you just open it, it saves you with a contact, with a phone number. So that's
Yeah.
very easy. You don't even have to be friends on Facebook.
Yeah.
And then people just tend to communicate and press this record button. They tend to sort of like record their message. We'll be
Yeah.
around 5, 7, sometimes 20 seconds, send it off, and the other person can listen to it, sort of like holding the phone up to the ear and then doing the same in reverse. And some conversations would just be consisting of voice messages. Right? I think it would be sort of like, I couldn't really say which one is more important, text messages or voice messages, but the quantity, definitely, I think voice messages in terms of content being spoken, definitely outweighs the texts.
I agree. I think this is something that I've had issues with in the past, actually, a fair bit. Just the sheer fact that obviously so much of communication is lost over text, so much. And so if you're having an argument with someone, or you're trying to really like sort something out over text, I often just say, no, let's just call, because you really can't articulate your view and what you want to get across with just words. You really need expression.
Because language is more than words.
Yeah, language is far more than words. And so this idea of just, flicking across a voice message, how easy is that? How smart are these guys? How long is it going to take for us to catch on and be like, wow, like that's a far more clever approach, simply put. I can't see any downside to it.
Yeah, it actually took me some time to get adjusted, because this became a trend around, I would say, 2015, 2016 maybe.
Yeah, it's so recent.
And some friends of mine just used to send me these voice messages. I used to listen to them, but still text like a normal person would text back, right?
Yeah.
So it took me some time to get adjusted, and it took me some time to get confident as well. Right, because in public transport, for example, it took me a long time to find the nerve to actually record my own voice in the tube or in the bus, right?
Yeah.
So that's just something that takes time. And you said, how long will it take for you to adjust?
Yeah, because when I heard you, like you said, I'm going through the exact same thing right now. When I'm sending like a voice message, it's like, oh, it's so awkward, and then you still got more to say, but you kind of stumble on your words, and you're like. Anyway, so it's just very awkward to me. But when you do it, it just sounds so natural.
It's just, whenever there is more depth to the conversation, I think that's when voice messages really benefit.
Yeah.
Really outweigh.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like you're telling a story, for instance. Yeah. Although telling a story, admittedly, is sometimes rather humorous over text. Like you can really put so much more character into it when you. What's the next step? Is it going to be like everyone just talks over video, like instead? Like is that the next step?
That's the step that I think we won't make as humanity.
Well, it loses a bit of its convenience.
Yeah, I think it does. Because I think when you think about virtual reality, right? So you would think about someone being able to actually see you without you actually being there. Yeah. With some glasses, sort of like you standing there. I think that might be a thing. That might happen with sort of like you having a character and
a virtual character
who would be able to portray some feelings and emotions, but actually speak at the same time. But I don't really think whether people would do that.
It's very hard. We were having a good conversation today, actually, about all this stuff and where technology is bound and what the biggest next game changer will be. But I think the point is you just can't really predict it, because the game changer is something that will be so just out of the square and then so fundamentally just, I don't know, out there that it's something you really couldn't predict. So I guess we'll just have to wait.
And you can't really see the impact of it either.
Yeah, exactly.
When people thought about personal computers and the first predictions were made when it comes to how big of a square, how big of a building do you need for a personal computer. That's actually when technology was already advancing so quickly that we have iPhones and smartwatches today, where you have the whole computing power of what used to be a huge building filled with these whole boards that you used to use for computers. It's just unimaginable, and this conversion from a huge computer that took up a room into something that you can put in your pocket, that's something that's going to happen again.
Yeah.
It's bound to be happening again. Some revolution will come along, and we can't really predict it. And I think our current minds couldn't even grasp.
Conceive. They
couldn't conceive the possibilities.
New word. Use that one.
I conceive.
That's probably my favourite thing, is that I teach you like a new phrase or a new word, and it's like,
that was embarrassing for me.
It's the exact word. Yeah, and then when you say the wrong word or the wrong pronunciation, I'm like, Ben, come on, you're better than these, Like. Anyway, do you reckon that about wraps it up? Because I think the sun
has already set.
It has very much already set, and I reckon we might be getting very dark sooner or later. Although you are already rather tanned. myself.
You
not
could use
so
some.
much.
You could use some.
I could, yeah, it's probably a bit embarrassing. It's like white against black. But yeah, thank you for joining me on the show and in the journey. And yeah, once again, thank you so much for your support with the whole thing in itself and your feedback as well.
Thank you for teaching me so much throughout these insights. I have to say, some episodes I watched them and I was like, that really, you spoke for me in that case. That's something that I can really relive because I've experienced it already and I've taken a different stance at it because I learned some things. I learned my personal things as well.
Yeah.
That's why I always commented my sort of like my personal views as well.
Mm.
But when it comes to the content you put out in these insights, it's just very personal. But you can, as a person of my age, as a person who's under 25, you can really take away a lot. I think.
I appreciate that.
And I think I would be on the right side when you look back on these insights in about 30 years' time. Then you can relive so many memories and so many experiences
exactly
of what you did 30 years ago. And that's something that you can't buy in 30 years' time. That's just something that you can be thankful of in the future.
And you know, like I've actually explained this to you as well, but and I said it in like the first video that I did, but I really mean it. These videos are very much for myself, for that exact reason. They really are. And I'm not overly fussed as to whether, you know, they get heaps of views or they don't, or the likes and stuff. But the main thing that I do quite like is feedback. And so you in particular, you give heaps of feedback on these videos because that's, personally speaking, how I learn. And I really love, you know, the favorite thing that I get out of them, even though they are for myself, is that when other people, if it affects other people, it's like, wow, like that's like such a bonus, you know, when you and I know it's easier said than done going and commenting your own personal input on someone's video just down to the sheer fact that you don't necessarily want other people to hear about your own life. You're not as open as I am, which is rare. But you know, like I really appreciate just hearing other people's opinions, whether it's a negative feedback or positive feedback, or just you have experienced similar circumstances, like you said, or different circumstances. Yeah, just other people reaching out. That's like a really, for me, it's like a really quite a rewarding thing. So I appreciate you doing that yourself. It's been good.
You're very welcome.
Anyway, yeah, that about wraps it up, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see you at the same time next week, hopefully. I've got to form a more consistent upload schedule, but I'm just enjoying my travels far too much.
And you have to live in the moment. Yeah. You can't really.
This is a whole different topic. We're going to talk about this another time. We're going to talk about this another time because we will be here forever. Yeah. All right. Anyway, I'll see you guys sometime soon. Catch you.